This is part of a project, as Tanya said. It's and she works for the industry as the communications officer under this project, and it's funded through the Chestnut Fund, which is a combination of the statutory levy that US growers pay, matched by Australian government funds and managed by Hort Innovation. Today's symposium has been sponsored by Rinlatec Engineering, who are based in Myrtleford, and I'll talk a little more about that at the end. But we appreciate the support from Rinlatec Engineering in relation to it. Our presenters, Richard Guthrie, Elke Jasper is going to give a short overview on chestnut blight and the survey work. Darren Crivies from Connexus Global, who's just joined a little while ago, will talk about the aspects of soil testing and the importance of that. And of course, Tanya and myself and Nat Rinaldi, who is not on today, but as I said, is the sponsor for today's event. So we'll get underway, and Richard introduced himself initially, and so we've got a couple of, I suppose, Dorothy Dixes to start with, and then what we can do is people can, if they've got a question, they can raise their hand and unmute themselves and ask the question. So Richard, thank you for your participation today, and we'll start with a simple question. Given that the season's starting, what should growers be doing in relation to tree management?
Yeah, well, we turned it from post-harvest to pre-harvest because, really your pre-harvest starts with not packing everything up and going and living in Queensland after you've picked up the nuts, but it never stops, as we all know that. I guess one of the first things that I'd say should be common practice in most orchards is to address fallen burrs and things like that with mulching and general orchard hygiene and things like that. And I suppose at about that stage, I'm talking about just post harvest, you perhaps should have had some results from leaf testing and things like that, and be getting your head around on making a plan for fertilisers coming up for the following spring. Hearing some alarming figures of what fertiliser prices are doing right now, with China shutting down ports and not exporting simple fertilisers like urea and all that. So maybe some of these things are not going to be such a common practice, especially for the smaller grower. So look, basically during the winter time, I don't see a hell of a lot to do on, as far other than pruning. And one of the things that's come to my mind in recent years on an intensive chestnut farm, and I'm talking sort of 3.5 metres by 7 metre rows, is the amount of available sunlight hitting the ground. And I think there's not a great deal of understanding, or I certainly wasn't aware of it. We're starting to learn just how important that soil is that drives the whole factory there. And I'm starting to come to the conclusion that when you're looking at pruning a tree, if you're intensive as we are, you don't need many branches in a tree to have a crop if you're close together. And this is, I guess, some of the apple mentality coming out of me. So with all that in mind, we've actually started to remove trees out at Nightingale Farm now. You can be pretty severe with it, and to be honest, a lot of this work should have started happening probably 7 or 8 years ago. But we're culling trees now to give the trees more room to spread, and this is a wintertime activity. Also, the trees that are left are receiving a prune as well, and as time goes on, I'm starting to be more and more convinced about this sunlight is king, and not only to the aerial parts of the trees, but to the ground. And I'm just starting, we've had a couple of serious issues with red Spanish, for example, the last couple of years, where year before last, they set a tremendous crop, but were all wafers, half of them floated. This year they set a normal crop as well, but were way undersized. And, it's not for the want of care in my case, but I'm just starting to think that it's the soil that's not receiving that sunlight, and therefore, no matter what you throw on the ground, it's not available to the trees. And I mean, I can't prove that. It's just one of my observations. I mean, if the apple hat was put on, we know that if you're not growing grass down the rows where you've got too much shade, and therefore you're not colouring fruit. And I think the same principles apply with nuts. Some sunlight's not filtering down into the soil, and the UV and whatever else is associated with it there. How can your soil be healthy? It's just one of the observations I've made in the last few years, just trying to determine what's going on with this red Spanish issue. To start to overcome all that, about 2 weeks ago, we sprayed out I suppose you'd just call it a live culture mix, full of beneficial funguses, organisms and trichodermas and that kind of thing on the ground. There's been a lot of research done on this now, and I think the benefits are starting to speak for themselves, and the people that used to call them, excuse me, snake oils are starting to get lesser and less, and I think the proof's in the pudding, and so that's what we're starting to do. I think it starts from the ground up. I don't think there's any if buts or maybes about that. So the Nightingale Farm, we're starting to play around with things like that, and that's done about now, along with a general ground spread fertiliser. And again, we're going down the hybrid ag path, trying to use, it's not organics as such, but seaweed based blends and live cultures going on the ground to help start this improve the soil there. Plenty of documentation on the benefits of that.
Excuse me, Richard. So you base those nutrients going on the trees on a leaf analysis? Is that?
Yeah. Leaf samples, and look, we took leaf samples back mid-late summer, and lo and behold, the trees are sitting there nutritionally fairly balanced. There's a couple of little minor nutrients there that are could do being boosted, but the basics are there. The fact is that the trees can't be getting the nutrient. There's something, the engine stopped, and I just put it down to sunlight. And most people would know the Nightingale Farm out the road there. It is intensive, and you look up the rows there and all you see is leaf matter. There's not a blade of grass anywhere. And I just think that the whole soil environment there is becoming sterile. There's no sunlight to drive the motor there.
And excuse me, Richard, so did you do a follow-up leaf analysis after summer?
No, not yet. That'll come this year.
Right.
So we've made the plan to put all this product on the ground, sprayed and broadcast. And you're not going to see an improvement overnight. In the big book of things, Tanya, there's no one out there that can tell you do this, and this, and you're going to benefit that, and that. It just doesn't work like that with chestnuts. It's unfortunately there are some good ideas out there, but you got to just think outside the square a bit, I think. And anyway, this is a program I've started to go down the path of, and time will tell, I suppose.
Richard, Kim's just asked a question. Who does your leaf tests, and can you recommend a chestnut agronomist?
Yeah, well, that's a good one too, isn't it?
So we've got Darren on board.
Hybrid ag is the chemical. Well, not chemical. They're the the ground spread and the soil inoculate manufacturers, and they're based down in Wangaratta, Hybrid Ag. That's who we're using. Other than that, you know, the traditional program is 250 to 300 kilograms of either rustica or platinum plus per hectare per year, and that's basically all a chestnut tree gets. And there's no rocket science in that, really. And that would just come, you know, through a Muir's or somewhere like that that's labelled to us here. So I'll make one comment. I know I'm seeing a lot of, I don't know if anyone else has looked closely to point at this point right now, but there seems to be an explosion of scale again in trees this year. I know my neighbour out the road there, Brendan Thompson's already sprayed. Him and I have spoken about it. And particularly in red Spanish and even down the lower reach of the trees, I'm seeing scale all over the trees. And to most people, that's going to be about as far as it goes because not everyone's prepared to spray, but we've had this in the past. And any of the oil products, winter or summer oil, will do a fairly good job of controlling it. If you're that way inclined and like to spray and you've got the machine, well, mix a bit of Lawsban with it and it'll soon fix the scale up. And I've often wondered about a butt drench of a Confidor, one of those products. Although it's, you know, again, nothing on label for any of this, mind you, but we know it fixes the problem. So, and just such a tiny thing in swarm plagues over the whole tree, they've got to have an effect. So yeah, have a look around and see what you can see in your own place, and try and address it if you can, because they will affect young tip shoots, no doubt about that.
So Richard, what do you put the scale down to, and you know, can you put it down to a seasonal type situation?
Well, this is only the second year I've seen it in over 22 or 3 years, Trevor. And you know, it's probably part of the environment. It certainly can affect apple trees. I mean, that place of Nightingales was a large apple orchard, and scale was never an issue in apple trees as such. But it's obviously because we always used to treat, not necessarily for scale, we used to treat for another insect called woolly aphid with these same products that will control scale. So scale never got out of control on apple plantings, but it's obviously found a foothold somewhere and reintroduced itself into nut trees. As to how it's got so widespread, Trevor, all the common reasons and ways, grafting wood and maybe on jumpers and sleeves of people and workers and that sort of thing, you know. But it certainly can. It can be so bad it will cover the young sticks and young twigs and shoots to the point where you can't actually see any woody part of the plant. You'll rub your fingers up the new shoots and your fingers are just covered in muck, you know, because it's in such plague numbers. So that's one thing to look out for. So what else?
Well, the aspect of soil health and that, you know, how important is that in relation to potentially managing some of our other disease problems like Phytophthora?
Well, everything's in a symbiotic relationship, really, isn't it? And just going back to what I hit on there before about shade and some even some small holdings. It might only be an acre or 2 acres of trees of huge, great big canopy. And at this time of year, all you're doing is walking underneath a huge tree, and all it is leaf matter on the ground, and no sunlight's been able to penetrate the ground or get to the ground, and everything needs sunlight. And if you don't have that sunlight there, I mean, this is my thinking of late again. How can the whole system work? But I mean, soil health. I mean, we all just think dirt's dirt, you know. And I'm even with my work in the nursery, I know better now, and gone to the nth degree with fumigation products to try and grow a crop of nursery trees year in, year out. And I've got to the point now where I know it just does not work. I've done the best thing I can to destroy my soil, and by fumigation and vast quantities of man-made fertilisers and not reintroducing the beneficials and all this sort of thing, it's just meant that all I've got is this, you know, again, a sterile, hard clay product there now that won't grow anything. So, you know, any advice anyone can take on improving their soil structure with whatever product they choose can only benefit. And I think more of these products are available now that are on the, I'm not saying organic side of things, but the more humus and that sort of thing into the ground is more and more important to my mind these days.
Thanks for that, Richard. Any specific comments from the participants there? This is your opportunity.
Kim's just asked, when is it too late to prune?
It's too late to prune when you drop a branch out of the tree and you knock buds off. So even now, you could still prune in most areas I'm aware of. We have pruned late in the past, and we ended up stopping because as you're pulling branches out of the tree, you're actually damaging buds that were left behind or emerging leaves. So I reckon you've probably got another 2 to 3 weeks to prune, and that's fine.
Kim said that's great. Thanks. Thanks, Richard.
Any other questions there? You can unmute and ask a question.
Yeah, I've got one.
Yes.
Are you there?
Yes, Wendy. Yes, Wendy. Yep.
Yeah, I'm a bit concerned because the soil we've got up here is very fragile and compacts very easily. Does that become a problem, compaction of the soil, when you start working you know, with all the mowing and all that sort of stuff?
Nah, never. We've got tractors running around all the time, Wendy. I mean, it's not an issue. You've got to do the work.
Right.
Yeah, no, we're not worried about tractors running up and down the roads. And I mean, compare the operations that have got to go on in a chestnut farm, they're nowhere near as intensive as an apple farm. And look, you know, down to being an issue, there is some good machinery out there, aerators and the like, that will break the soil back up again. But I mean, all these sort of things, you know, they do it passively. They don't plough the paddock as such. But when you start to go down the path of mechanical harvesting, which the Nightingales have now, you've got to have a fairly flat level kind of an orchard to make these things work at their best. So it's another whole ball game. No sticks, you know, clean flat rows.
No low branches.
No low limbs. No one can clean out of the machine. That's right.
I've got a question. Over the past 5 years, I noticed that there's less and less grass underneath my trees, and obviously it's because the trees are getting bigger and getting less sunlight. This year, I didn't get a chance to mulch the burrs until only a couple of weeks ago because it's rainy and we're not there all the time. Should I try and burn the trash that's left, or is it better for mulch?
I'd mulch it. For sure.
Just keep mowing it and mulch it. Okay.
And look, just you know, there's phomopsis issues there too. If you carry over burrs from one year to the next, it's always a good idea to get rid of the trash from one year to the next.
So by mulching or burning?
By mulching.
Yeah, okay.
Well, don't burn it and let it go to the atmosphere. Mulch it in.
No, that's what we've always been mulching it in, but I'm just hoping that that's not causing the grass not to grow back.
Just light's going to be your problem. If you've got one of those small holdings with big trees, you just have a paddock of leaves at this time of year, no doubt.
It was until I mowed the crap out of it again and again and again.
And see, I know people around that have actually gone and mulched their under their trees, and then gone and thrown out seed, and got the seed to germinate, but it can't survive. There's just not enough light underneath the trees there to really establish a good pasture.
I'm even thinking that we need to cut out every second tree, kind of like what's been done on, is that you on the Buckland Valley Road that's done that?
No, I'm up at Stanley, up at the Nightingale at Stanley. Yeah.
So who has the chestnuts on the Buckland Valley Road by Nightingales?
But just back near Harris Lane there.
Yes.
No, I don't know.
Because this year they've taken out every second tree, just about, for the first time.
Is that further up the valley, past Nightingales?
No, on the way to Nightingales from Porpunka.
Just past the airport on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
I know the patch you're talking about. There was a little bit of few tree death, bit of tree death in there as well. It's not the dead ones just being taken out, is it?
No, some of the bigger ones too.
Okay.
It's
I
not
hate cutting them down, but because I love them, but I'm thinking that I just need to be cruel and thin them out a bit.
Not Scamboloni's property on the left-hand side.
No, that's you're wrong, Valley Trev. That's up at that's at Wandillagong. Yeah, there's really
anyway. Thank you.
Yeah. Really only the airport, and then there's a patch of nuts on the right hand side. There is a patch of nuts up through a paddock underneath the pine trees there on the left hand side.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a magnificent looking patch of nuts there until 2 or 3 years ago, until Phytophthora found it. It's still pretty solid, but it was a shame to see the Phytophthora come down through that patch and just take out trees willy-nilly here and there.
And then I'm up Montgomery Lane, and there was a Nightingale patch there for a while too. That's kind of been left for me to pick whatever I want.
Oh, you're up the creek there. What do they call that creek?
Devil's Creek.
Yeah. I didn't even know there was any chestnut trees left there. But so you've got the remnants of the Nightingale farm there, more or less.
No, I pick there if I feel like it. And there's about 120 trees left there. And then we have 60 up at our place.
Okay.
Further up the road.
Yeah.
Richard, I have a question for you. Is there a difference in what you should do for younger trees versus older trees, like really, really well-established trees at this time of year?
Regards to like fertiliser and...
Yeah, I suppose so.
If you're trying to establish an orchard, you're probably pushing the trees along. And I remember back when we first started to plant new young trees and the Nightingale place, they were getting planted. They had a product in the hole, like an Osmocote or something like that in the hole when we planted them, tree guarded, substantial mulch put around them. And then when the warmer weather came and they needed water, we always had some sort of fertiliser in the water and hand watering every single tree, and did this right throughout the whole summer. And we're pushing, trying to get that tree to fill its space as quickly as we could and make it grow. In a sense, you can't hold back with fertiliser on mature trees either. It's like you still like a good feed, so big old trees, you think about what they would pull out of the ground to produce a crop. That's got to be replaced. So you're not really trying to push the tree for growth. You're trying to, I suppose, set the tree for crop, and your nitrogen fertilisers are probably a little bit less. So any sort of balanced, NPK fertiliser, and then I go back to a Rustica or a Platinum Plus. Platinum was said to be more beneficial for chestnut trees because it's slightly higher in potassium or phosphorus, one way or the other, which is better for nut development and so on. So, you could probably produce just as good a crop by going completely organic and just using pelletized chicken manure or something like that. But they all require feeding. To keep the virality in a tree, I suppose, some pruning is always a benefit. I mean, if you're selling nuts commercially, you're really governed by size. And if you're growing smalls and mediums and standards and trying to present them to the market, well, you're just not going to achieve success. You're not going to make money. There's no doubt about that. There's just no money in the smaller sizes. So the only way you can make chestnuts bigger is food and water and pruning. So some sort of, and it's hard to prune a big tree, I realise that. And unless you're set up for it and got the right gear, it's near impossible to get way up there and prune big trees. Almost they can't be pruned from the ground. So if that's the situation you got, well, you are kind of stuck with it, I guess. Unless you hire the services of someone with the gear and just do that once a year, prune to keep them virile. Otherwise, things just tend to, a chestnut tree you live for 100 years, and but if you're trying to sell the crop commercially, you just wouldn't be achieving anything. So.
What we might do is Darren Cribbies. You're on board there, Darren. Do you want to come in and talk about the aspect of soil testing?
Yeah, happy to do so, Trevor, if everybody's ready for that.
Yep.
Share a little presentation.
Hang on. I'll. Sharing. You should be right.
Don't go anywhere, Richard.
No?
Don't go anywhere. We're not finished with you yet.
Can't go outside, it's raining.
Does that come up, Trev?
Yeah, just go to full slide now.
Yeah, so Darren, if you...
Yep.
Yes, can you?
Yep.
That's all right. Very good.
Okay. Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the invitation to give you a few minutes. Trev's asked me to put some slides together, and I'd like to pick up on a few comments that Richard's made probably through the presentation. So let's get underway with that. So the approach I take is something that you'll see as the 4 R's generally talked about in fertiliser and nutrition sources or references, and that's the right source, right rate, right time, right place. And to take Richard's points there of what has typically happened in nutrition in chestnuts is, here's my favourite bag of fertiliser, Rustica or Platinum that Richard's talked about, and yeah, I used 250 kilos last year and I got a good result, so let's use 350 next year and see if we get a better one. I think we're in a much more sophisticated place than that, and I think most farmers are really looking to utilise soil testing and tissue testing to get way better results than they currently are. Hopefully I'll convince you that the methods that I'm using with several chestnut growers is going to do that for you. This is my view of what goes on in nutrition generally. We've got our eye on the prize, but maybe the prize is not really what we should have our eyes on. So I'm going to put this in the category of the bag of Rustica in the bloke's arms and what really should be happening right behind him. So there's several things that that you really need to know and be asking when you've got an agronomist coming to give you some advice. And so and the reason we take soil analysis is what nutrients are in the soil in an available form or soon to be available forms. Now, that takes some experience and some knowledge within within agronomy of a particular crop, and in particular where we should be paying much more attention generally, and that is even between varieties of chestnuts will behave differently and have different demands. The next part of that is really how quickly those nutrients will become available. If we have a flush of growth at any particular time through the growing season, those nutrients need to become available, and that's where soluble fertilizers are often used. All right, we're expecting some warm weather, we're irrigating, and nutrients the tree will move, and it will be looking for nutrition really quickly. Most important time typically to be observing that is when you've got nut fill. So as Richard touched on a little earlier, the nutrition that's available for the tree to grow and to produce nuts of a particular size, and that's where we're at. We're going to touch on that in a couple more minutes. The other aspect there is really at that same time a nut is being produced is also a time a tree is starting to store carbohydrates for next year's growth. So they're points to be taking into account. The source that we touched on earlier, am I going to use calcium nitrate, calcium sulfate? Potassium nitrate or potassium sulfate? Do I need the nitrogen? Do I need the sulfur? Why do I need those and a different form at any particular time? You should be getting that information from your tissue and soil analysis, and all the other nutrients are in that same category. And then it's how much do I get of each. With plant tissue analysis, of a little spelling error there. Plant tissue analysis, I'll show you a little chart that I'm using with my growers and what we're expecting to get out of that information. We are defining critical growth stages to make some decisions on of when we would intervene or monitor for some reason. One of the things that does not happen very often in many crops at all, broadacre cropping is probably the one that does the best job at it, and that is correlating your tissue testing and your soil analysis to your yield. If your soil test and you get some numbers back and it says you're at 10 and you need 20, you should be at 20, then all you need to do is find another 10. Put it on, buy a fertilizer, put it on. Get some chook poo, put it on. But that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to reach yield. Now, also pick up on something that Richard said earlier, and I will be critical of what he said, and it's not uncommon, and it's not a criticism, but critical. The only time there is balance in the tree is when you take the fruit off. That's the only time there's balance, because the tree's job is to reproduce. It's going to do everything it possibly can to make that fruit, because its job is to reproduce and make a new tree, just in case it doesn't last. So it will do everything to put the right amount of nutrients into that nut that supports that nut growing next year. Not for us to eat, but to grow next year. So I want you to keep that in mind as well. To be critical of tissue testing, and certainly some advice here to be very, very wary. If you're getting tissue testing and there's a number over on the right-hand side of the page that says this is where you need to be very aware that most numbers are very old. They're probably not on the variety you're growing. Those numbers are not going to be in an area that we live in Australia, because very little tissue analysis and tissue correlation to yield is being done in Australia. So most importantly for you to understand, if you've got a number that's a desirable number for tissue test on chestnut on a flowering stage mature leaf, that number has been derived from the leaf not showing symptoms of deficiency on at that stage. That's visual symptoms of deficiency of that element at that growth stage. So can you see my mouse there? Can you see my mouse on that slide?
Yeah, move it. We can.
Is that it? So what I'm talking about, if you're looking at a tissue test result and you've got a number on that chart, it's a visual, it's on that point there where you no longer see deficiency. So it's somewhere in here. This point here is called hidden hunger.
No, we can't see your mouse, Darren.
Can't see it? Oh, I've got it. Let me try this little thing here. How about that?
Yep.
All right. So if you've got a number on your tissue test that says this is where you need to be, that is only at that point there. That is where visual symptoms of that element are no longer visible. Where we need to be is here, sufficient. And we've got to figure that out. I'm going to show you how to do that in a couple of minutes. Most tissue testing numbers, once you get past that, is in this area here of hidden hunger, what we refer to as hidden hunger. You cannot see that that tree's got adequate nutrition in it. We're going to get past that in just a few minutes. All right, let me turn that off. It'll get annoying. We'll go to the next slide. Here's some numbers on some tissue testing that I've done with a grower recently. In 2018, I started working with them, and this is the nut removed. This is tissue in the nut removed. Sorry, a tissue analysis of the harvested nut. At this stage here, and you can see the numbers across there for those particular elements, this particular grower was producing 16 tons of nuts. In the first year, we moved that to 38 tons, and there's that tissue result. So whatever that number is on the tissue test that we ever did, this is what it should have actually been. So we correlate that to our yield, always correlating to yield. This is bring up any questions there, Tanya, if we get into this, because we're starting to get a whole lot of numbers and a whole lot of things after 5 o'clock. This is a new grower I've just started working with last year, and we can see that the correlation to this, he's producing 6 tons of nuts, all right, on his property. So these numbers again are way down. So this is a tissue test of the harvested nut. That's the time when we want to really understand where our nutrition is, and we reverse engineer. We work backwards through the season.
Your jacket is in there. Hi, Annabelle.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody's got that. So by this is removed nut. These are the numbers over a couple of years, moving from 16 ton to 38 ton, and here's another grower that's producing 6. So we can reverse engineer, understand where we've got to get to. So 1.01 nitrogen needs to be heading towards 1.5. How do we do that? When do we do it? How much? We go back to that earlier slide I presented. What is the soil producing? And what do we need to top up with nutrition, and when might we do that? Okay. Just to talk about now some soil analysis. It's the same thing. Understanding where that soil is and when nutrients will become available to produce the yield that we require. We monitor the decisions we make in our soil at 3 growth stages through the season. One of them is the removed nut. That's a pretty important growth stage. What am I removing from the property? Richard mentioned that earlier about removing nutrition. Very, very important. What do I need to replace that the soil can't produce itself? Okay, so we've got some numbers there. There's some sulfur. We're pH, organic matter, what we might release in nitrogen in the soil through the season. Okay, we'll move on a little further. Looking at some other numbers, you'll see base saturation percent often reported on soil testing. These are the numbers. We've got to figure out what these mean. what the constraints are to the production of fruit, and then make some modifications. Trace elements, and I do use some other testing on there that's not normally on tests to get some other numbers that help ensure that we're making good decisions with variability in our soils and our testing methods. All right, so if I've got 0.33 boron, I'm trying to look at ways in which we're testing. If we put boron on, I want to see the tree picking it up, and we go back. If I just go back to those couple of slides, and I can monitor, if I'm monitoring 3 times a year, is this the right time to get a yield response to me making an application of boron? And that can be any element. And that's what we're trying to do with this harvested yield slide. Beginning to wrap up, this is the sort of report that I provide back to growers pre-bud burst. So we've got quite specific timing to get to make applications. This is not complete by any means. I didn't want to confuse you with or provide a false recommendation if anybody was taking some notes there. The most important point from this afternoon's presentation is the analysis time. This is the time we want to do analysis. And we've got a leaf analysis around through the middle of flowering, roughly mid-November or thereabouts. We've got another leaf analysis when we've got this first week of Feb sort of stage when a burr might begin to change colour. And then we've got the nut sample and a soil sample there at harvest. That's telling us we try and correlate those two things together. All right, so that's what we're doing to try and build some numbers around what that tree's doing, when it's doing it, and the correlation to yield. One of the next steps that we want to start to look at really is not doing these average soil tests across the property, and I think we're going to start to head into doing multiple samples across a property and developing zones based on soil type and quite possibly to tree variety as well. All right, so this is coming up. One of the prohibitive things in Australia. One of the prohibitive things in Australia is the cost of testing. So, if I could convince you that actually the cost of testing, if you're getting the right results, it's probably not a big cost at all. As I pointed out earlier, there's a lot of money went into the grower's pocket by making some good decisions on that soil test. Come up there. Sorry. Yep. Go ahead.
2 minutes.
Yep. Got right on time. I'm glad there was a couple of comments around soil health and I'm just going to touch on those quite quickly. There's a range of soil health type tests that are available. This is the Haney test, which if you're interested in soils, it's a relatively new one that's being promoted as a green test with some correlation to biology. There's no biology analysis in that, so it's really still around the nutrients and what might be being driven by biology. More specifically and available in Australia is this type of test now, and this is a phospholipid fatty acid analysis. We've done a number of these with some research trials in chestnuts. We've got some numbers there that we can start to develop as real indicators of soil health and how soil is performing. All right, so this is a weighted average of the next slide I'm going to show you, which is starting to get a bit heavy going, particularly heading into the evening. But these are functions, so nutrient solubilization, nutrient cycling, etc., disease resistance, drought resistance. These are functions that we want our soil to perform at a very high level. These functions are also driven by microbiology. And these, the next slide I'm going to show you is going to start to warm you up and get you excited for the evening. But I'll move along through there. So each of these groups of organisms provide a contribution in different amounts to the functioning of our soils on that previous slide. So this is the type of test that's available when we start to get to understanding, and the points that were made there earlier of disease resistance, what diseases are present, and what are the organisms within this group that are helping to reduce or suppress pathogen in our chestnut groves, and I work across a broad range of crops, so we're looking at different correlation and numbers to all other crops and how we manage that orchard floor and our soils. So that's the sort of thing that's available for you, and that's a bit more than what we're doing, what most people are doing, but this is becoming more and more readily understood and usable in orchards. All right, so I'll wrap it up there, Tanya, and I'm thinking that's right on time.
Thank you, Darren, and that was very, very useful information. I'm sure everyone will agree. Trevor, were you looking to see if...
well, can you take that down, Darren? And what I'll do is ask Elkie to start to load her screen while she's doing that. Any questions to Darren and Richard?
I'll make a comment to you, Darren, that I'm happy to see that there's that sort of testing or information available now, because it just confirms my suspicion about today, as you're probably aware, is International Fertiliser Day. And it was, what did I hear? It was a guy that originally invented nitrogenous fertiliser to be put on paddocks, which has evolved over the last century to be able to give us yields in fruit, vegetables, nuts and whatever over the last century, and got us to where we are today. But it's not all balanced, is it? I mean, soil is king, and if the soil's not working, it doesn't matter how much nutrient you pour on it. If the soil's not working, the engine aren't running.
Yeah, it's a complicated and a complex dynamic. We can replace soil function to a degree with a soluble fertilizer, and we've probably done that since the 1950s in Australia. All right, and the process that you're referring to is the Haber-Bosch process, which is conversion of atmospheric nitrogen to a form that we can squirt in a bag and carry around the place and pour it out. And both that and phosphorus had come out of, they are waste products. While we've got fertilizer products, they were waste products from two wars: nitrogen in the First World War and phosphorus in the Second. We had to find a place for it. Agriculture is pretty good. Soil, you can throw it on the soil and plants grow. So just jumping back to where we were, that we can replace soil function to a fair degree with a bagged fertilizer product, but we can do it much more efficiently and get many other benefits like disease suppression, nutrient solubilization. They're the sorts of things that we're really trying to get to make to continue taking these next 1% increments into improving our efficiency and sustainability of our soil management and our crop production. So yeah, I make a fertilizer recommendation for nitrogen. I understand that in respect of what it may or may not do to the tree and yield, and I also understand what it may or may not do to soil biology. So I think I make some reasonably good decisions. Yeah. But if I've got biodynamic clients, organic clients, and we manage nutrition very differently. But efficiency and
thanks
yield
for that, Darren.
is always
there is a number of video presentations, YouTube presentations that Darren did as part of a program, and I think Lachlan's gone now, but the North East Catchment Management Authority made available a small grant, and Darren did a number of events. So those two YouTubes are on the Chestnut website. So if you want to look at and go into more depth in relation to those soil aspects, then I'd encourage you to look at those.
Yeah, those two presentations are in the members area under technical bulletins.
We'll move on now, and I'd invite Elke Jasper, who is the Chestnut Industry Development Officer, to give you an overview of chestnut blight and lead you into the aspects of orchard surveillance. So over to you, Elke. Thank you.
Am I up?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. I'll just reduce that. Hi, my name's Elke Jasper. I'm the new Biosecurity Officer for Chestnuts Australia. My position is supported by a grant from the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions in collaboration with Chestnuts Australia Incorporated. We are working together to eradicate chestnut blight, and okay, I can't move it. Today I'm going to talk about the spring survey for chestnut blight, and I'll recap on management of blight and a little bit about the disease, some lookalikes, survey forms, and any questions you might have. It's been an 11-year program. The first incidence was found of the disease was found in 2010. An investment has been over $4 million towards eradication. It's an extremely severe disease. Overseas, chestnut industries have been devastated by chestnut blight. In North America, chestnut forests, within the North American chestnut forest, blight caused mass tree death. It really was the first tree species in modern times to approach extinction. In the northeast region, there was 18 properties infected. The eradication program has reduced incidence of disease to 1 infection on a single tree each year during the 2018 and 2019 surveys. In 2020, there was a transition to management, and landholders became responsible for blight on their properties. This is a brief description. It's chestnut blight is a bark-inhabiting Ascomyces fungus causing blight on stems, branches and cankers. And you can see in the photo that bright orange, and then the healthy bark up which is normal olive green. And chestnut is the most susceptible host to the blight. There are other hosts, including oak, maple and staghorn and hickory. The damage done is that cankers develop until the stems or branches are girdled, cutting off the supply of nutrients to the rest of the branch or plant. And the cankers cause the leaves to wilt and die, eventually killing the branch above the canker. And they produce this flag of yellow-brown leaves, which are really a good way to check out trees and zoom in on. The whole tree will eventually be infected and die. There's both sexual and asexual reproduction within the blight fungus, and during sexual reproduction there's this orange stomata that bear the fruiting bodies of the blight fungus. They're about 1 to 3 millimetres in size, and inside the stomata is the perithecia. The colour indicates that the fungus is actively producing spores. During asexual production, they produce these long yellow tubes, as you can see in the photo, called pycnidia. And these produce the codnidia, which are the asexual spores. The main methods of dispersal are through wind, water and rain splash, and transport of infected material by humans, animals and insects. And these include farm operations via clothing and machinery and equipment, budding material and cuttings from infected trees. The chestnut blight produce mycelium fans under the bark, which in the Cambrian layer, and they when they reproduce the stroma, they burst through the bark. So that's a really good way to check for when you're looking at suspects. some lookalikes that people have asked me about in surveys have been lichens, and as you can see, their lichen can be even the same colour, but they're not growing through the bark. They're actually sitting on top. And here you go. That's a comparison there. And Gnomiotrys chestnut rot has similar symptoms to chestnut blight, and they include cankers and fruiting bodies such as pycnidia. And on your right there is an example of chestnut blight. And below is the chestnut rot. And the difference here is that the stromata in chestnut rot are actually a lot smaller. If you can see there, I'm not sure if you can see my arrow actually, but they're a lot smaller anyway. That's 1 mil across there.
Yes, we can see your arrow, Elkie.
Oh, good. And in the same, both funguses are in the same order. And another lookalike that people have asked me about is bubbly bark, and they see the slits and think that perhaps it might be blight. And there's actually no colour or pathogen that you can see, and there hasn't been any evidence of a pathogen in the past in bubbly bark, but it's likely to be a response to environmental conditions. Recently, we took a sample of at a chestnut farm and of a canker here on your right, and there were a lot of fruiting bodies in there, and but they were a lot smaller than the chestnut blight, and it was found to be Netria. And I'll just read a few things about it. Netria is a fungus producing cankers on branches. It is common and potential lethal disease that affects many trees and shrubs. It can cause significant damage on newly planted as well as established plants. The fungi survive in the margins of the cankers. They produce fruiting bodies that can be cream, coral, orange or red, and they darken with age. The spores are dispersed by wind, water and pruning tools. There is no cure for Netria cankers, and managing Netria involves removing smaller branches by below the cankers, pruning about 6 to 8 inches below the canker, and burning these prunings, and also disinfecting your pruning tools after each cut by dipping them in at least a 10% solution for 30 seconds or 70% alcohol spray. So why survey? It is important for prevention of blight spread, early detection, less cost to the farmer, and the surveillance at a farm level contributes essential information to regional biosecurity efforts and ultimately to the national status. The evidence of absence as well as presence data is important, and it's uploaded to AusPestCheck databank. And this may lead to eradication status in Victoria. Preemptive rather than reactive is a good method. Regular surveying, recording, increasing awareness of changes within a tree or orchard over time alerts farmers to any disease problems. And that's like Netria bit was picked up that way. Growers are our first line of defence, and all chestnut growers are asked to remain vigilant and survey their chestnuts and oak trees every 3 months. And if you have found chestnut or suspect, you have contact me, the biosecurity officer, or ring the exotic plant pest hotline. And early detection allows for early intervention and management of the disease. This is critical to minimising the spread of chestnut blight. Chantal from Ag Victoria produced this guide in conjunction with Chestnut Australia, and at the back, I think everyone should have a copy of this guide. If they don't, let me know. And at the back of the guide is this surveillance form, and this is pretty straightforward to fill out, but if you have problems, let me know. It's It's available at Chestnut Australia's webpage or in Agriculture Victoria's website, and you can download and print it off, or it's an electronic version that's interactive. You can fill it out online.
Elkie, could I just mention that that interactive survey is also now on the homepage of Chestnuts Australia?
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. Yep, good. In Victoria, the landholder is responsible for managing chestnut blight on their property. Where the presence of chestnut blight is suspected or known or not managed, Agriculture Victoria can place the property under quarantine and stop all movement of plant material, machinery and equipment until infected trees are destroyed and decontaminated. And hygiene, it's so important. On-farm biosecurity plans are a very good move, and involve the movement of people and plant products, both on and off and within the orchard. Please refer to the guide for any further information. And due to COVID-19 restrictions, Chestnut Australia will not be able to carry out the spring survey or have industry volunteers involved. Please fill out the chestnut blight survey forms. We need your help to eradicate chestnut blight. Thank you. Any questions? No. So stop share. Is that good?
Well done, Elkie. That was brilliant.
Any questions to Elkie while if not, a question to Richard, Bubbly Bark Richard. Any commentary on that?
Really gone quiet, hasn't it, Trevor? It seems to be it's sort of had its moment in the sun, so to speak, and I see a tree here and there occasionally, but it's certainly not the problem that it was there for a couple of years. Trees seem to get to an age and they're susceptible to it for a year or two, and then it just miraculously disappears. It's just one of those weird things that happen every now and then.
So do you think it's a growth spurt type thing?
Look, yeah, there's that to be said about it. I mean, why the base still suckers and the top dies, it's there's an inability for the carbohydrate sort of exchange to keep up or something from the top to the aerial part of the trees or what it is. It's a really weird one, and it's anyone setting up a large new planting would worry about it from around about years 5 to 7, and that's that seems to be where it hits. I would apologise to Elkie. I did receive the emails and the photos of that. I call it a dieback from that particular would you call that?
Netria.
Yeah, I did see all that, and I was in contact with the grower. He actually rang me about it, and I put his mind at ease straight away, because I've seen it plenty of time over the years, and to me it seems to be a poor light area within the tree, and it may be associated with a pruning cut or a failed branch that's broken or something like that, and you get that little bit of a dieback in the lower reaches of the tree where there's no sunlight and poor air movement and that sort of thing, and you get that bit of a dieback happening. I did rest his mind there pretty quickly, because I'd seen it plenty of times before.
Yeah.
Especially trees where guys have started pruning and prune severe. I mean, restarted a tree kind of thing, and you get this 2 or 3 years into the trees, regrowth. You've got this massive, trying to redevelop the tree, and the tree may have 14, 16, 20 litres going to the sky, and they all can't survive. And one will eventually drop out, and that's exactly what you see. You see that dieback issue there, and you take that poor limb out and you never see it again. It's all about light, and air movement around it.
Yeah, yeah, making a vulnerable branch. Yeah,
and if you knew the block in question, and I'm sure you do, that's exactly what he's got. He's not much sunlight hitting the ground in that block.
Yeah, they're quite close. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, he had 3 trees, and yeah.
Yeah.
With it, but it is an actual pathogen, and yeah.
And a lot of times it's associated with a bit of sunburn damage. You'll get I did ask him at the time. I said, what direction are those limbs facing? And he says predominantly to the northwest. So there's been a bit of a sun issue there, and caused a bit of a blister, and then these things get in and away they go.
Yeah, it seems to be you have to be so careful with any pruning, really, like that hygiene element. Yeah.
Okay. Look, thank you both, Elke and Richard, for that. Just to finish off, again, as I indicated at the beginning, we have a sponsor who's sponsored today's seminar, symposium, Rinlatech Engineering. They do produce a range of different equipment. They're based in Myrtleford, so you're encouraged to visit them, look at their website, and they have a range of products that are available to them, and a range of services. The important thing to note is that if you're wanting equipment, then you really need to be placing orders between now and the end of November, so they won't be taking orders after that, as they, I suppose, lead into the Christmas season and also the production side of things. Just some upcoming events. Working on a what I call a Trinut symposium. Unfortunately, the Trinut conference that we put together in September has been cancelled for the last 2 years. So I'm pulling together some programs. So one's on will be on a program called Fair Farms, which is a program looking at how individual businesses can set themselves up so they're meeting the guidelines that seem to be pushed onto growers from the retail sector and other areas. The Chestnut Australia Association annual general meeting and will be held on the 20th of November. Again, at this point in time, it will be a symposium via webinar, via Zoom. We hope to have a guest speaker leading into that that will also give you some reason for coming on to the annual general meeting, and similarly part of a program that I'm working on setting up across the 3 nut industries, being chestnuts, hazelnuts and walnuts. Probably run a program on fresh care, which is a quality assurance program, and they've come out with an updated version of fresh care and also a plan going forward. And then hopefully, all things equal, we'll be looking to run a Trinut conference over the weekend of the 9th, 10th and 11th of September, probably in New South Wales, just across the border from Echuca. So thank you everybody for your participation today, and I hope you've gained something out of the session. It's run a little longer than we had planned, but we started a little bit late, and we also gave everybody the opportunity to introduce themselves, which I think is the best way we can network, given that we can't network face to face. So again, thank you for your attendance. Happy to hang around if there are a couple more questions, but if not, again, thanks to Richard for his contribution, to Elke for her presentation, and Darren, who had to go, for his presentation. And if people want more information from about Darren and the services he offers, don't hesitate to contact Tanya or myself. Darren is a member of the executive committee of Chestnuts Australia, and he's also been, he's a valuable asset to the industry. So, and thanks to Tanya for all of her organisation in pulling this together. And as I said, we can hang around. If not, those that need to go, have a good evening, and hopefully for all of you in Victoria, lockdown disappears very quickly. I feel for all of you, and living in South Australia, having not really suffered very much at all as far as lockdown is concerned. But,
Lucky duck.
thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Lovely to meet everybody, and thanks for
Thank you
organising.
very much.
Terrific. Thanks so much. It's been great to see you.
Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you, Catherine. See you.
Bye.
Bye all.
Bye, Jan. Bye, Joey.
Bye.
Nikki. Yeah, excellent. We've had some great feedback already.
Yeah, you did. Richard had a lot of questions, which is really good.
That's great. Thanks so much, Richard.
Yeah, it was really
It
interesting.
was really great that you allowed people to pick your brains.
In this sort of environment, really, can you? Like, it doesn't. There's a million things going on, really, but you know.
Yeah, look, it's one of those things that you could have done a whole session, but I think again the aim is to give people a range of things, and I think that's we've done that today, and we'll
That's
look
good.
to do more of these sorts of things as a fill in between the face-to-face type activities. So.
What's going on with R&D, Trevor? Anything in the pipeline? Any other projects being spoken of?
Yes, we had a CAI executive meeting last night, so we'll look to get the R&D committee together quite quickly in the next couple of next 7 to 10 days, with the aim of pulling together some projects which we can then put into Horde Innovation to try and get some funding for it. So I'll talk with Darren tomorrow and sort of set up a date. Obviously, we'll do an evening session so it doesn't go into people's days, and similarly we'll set up a session, Elkie, with Brian and Dave to talk about Chestnut Blight and where we go forward from there. So
Okay.
I'll work those things out over the next 24 to 48 hours and send you relevant details.
Okay. Thank you. I'll go now.